My wife ordered our German Shepherd to attack my ex at a barbecue. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid should have been the biggest concern at my backyard barbecue, but instead I was watching my ex-wife Jessica march across my lawn like she owned the place, her voice already pitched to carry across 3 zip codes. Marcus. We need to talk about the money you owe me. Every conversation in my backyard died. Mrs. Henderson from next door nearly dropped her potato salad. The Johnsons' teenage son actually looked up from his phone. Even my German Shepherd, Thor, lifted his massive head from where he'd been lounging in the shade. I felt my new wife Sarah's hand find mine and give it a warning squeeze. We'd been married exactly 4 months, and I'd specifically planned this neighborhood barbecue so she could meet everyone without the drama that seemed to follow my divorce like a bad smell. Jessica showing up uninvited wasn't part of the plan. Jess, what are you doing here? I called out, trying to keep my voice level. The kids aren't even here today. She was wearing that fake smile she perfected during our marriage, the one that looked pleasant from a distance but turned predatory up close. Oh, I'm not here for Emma and Tyler. I'm here to meet your new wife and tell all these nice neighbors about the kind of man you really are. Sarah's grip tightened on my hand. She'd been a K-9 trainer for the police department for 8 years before switching to private security, and I could practically feel her shifting into tactical mode. Thor seemed to sense it too, rising to his feet with his ears perked forward. The court ordered $1,200 a month, Marcus, and you've been shorting me for 3 months running. That's theft of services. Jessica's voice got louder with each word, and I saw my neighbor Dave pull out his phone, probably recording. These people should know they're living next to a deadbeat dad who can't even support his own children. My face burned. The truth was more complicated. I'd been paying exactly what the divorce decree specified, but Jessica had been pushing for modifications that hadn't been approved yet. She was making it sound like I was dodging my responsibilities entirely. That's not how it works, and you know it, I said, stepping forward. I've never missed a payment. The amount you're demanding isn't what we agreed to. What we agreed to? Jessica laughed, sharp and bitter. We didn't agree to anything. You forced me into accepting scraps while you moved your little replacement into the house that should have been mine. I heard Sarah take a deep breath behind me. We bought this house together 6 months after my divorce was finalized, and Jessica had never lived here, never even seen it before today. But logic had never been Jessica's strong suit when she was performing for an audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessica announced, turning to address my guests like she was hosting her own show, meet Marcus Chen, Father of the Year. Too cheap to properly support his children, but apparently wealthy enough to throw parties for the whole neighborhood. The silence was deafening. I could feel everyone's eyes bouncing between Jessica, Sarah, and me like they were watching the world's most uncomfortable tennis match. This was exactly the kind of scene I'd hoped to avoid, and Jessica was just getting started. That's when I noticed Thor had moved closer to Sarah, his body language shifting from curious to alert. In our 4 months of marriage, I'd learned that Sarah and Thor communicated in ways that went beyond normal pet ownership. They were partners. And Jessica had no idea what she'd just walked into. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman from 2 houses down, cleared her throat and stepped forward. Excuse me, dear, she said to Jessica in that polite but firm voice that retired teachers perfect over decades. I don't believe you were invited to this gathering. Jessica's fake smile faltered for exactly half a second before snapping back into place. Oh, how sweet. Marcus has his neighbors trained to defend him already. She turned back to the crowd, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Did he tell you all that he's been taking money meant for his children's school supplies and spending it on, what was it, Marcus? A new sound system for your truck. My jaw clenched. The sound system had been a gift from Sarah for my birthday, and Jessica knew it. She'd seen my Facebook post thanking Sarah for the surprise. But twisting the truth was Jessica's specialty. The children's expenses are covered by the support I pay regularly, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Every payment documented and delivered on time. Documented. Jessica snorted. You mean those pathetic Venmo payments with your little joke messages? For the Minions and Princess Fund installment. Real professional, Marcus. Sarah stepped up beside me, and I noticed Thor had positioned himself at an angle where he could see everyone in the yard. It looked casual, but I was learning to recognize Sarah's tactical positioning when she felt a situation might escalate. I'm Sarah, my wife said, extending her hand toward Jessica. We haven't been properly introduced. Jessica looked at Sarah's outstretched hand like it might bite her. Oh, I know exactly who you are. The homewrecker who convinced my husband to abandon his family. Ex-husband, Sarah corrected calmly, her hand still extended. And Marcus and I didn't meet until 8 months after your divorce was finalized. Technicalities. Jessica waved dismissively, finally shaking Sarah's hand with the enthusiasm of someone handling a dead fish. The point is, you're benefiting from money that should be going to Emma and Tyler. I saw Sarah's expression shift slightly, not anger, exactly, but something colder. More focused. I'm sorry, could you clarify what money you're referring to? Marcus shows me all the support payments before he sends them. The amount matches your divorce decree exactly. Jessica's cheeks flushed red. The decree was based on his old salary. He got promoted to senior project manager in February. That changes everything. There it was. The real reason for this public performance. Any salary changes require a formal modification hearing, Sarah continued in that same level tone. You can't just decide the amount should increase and demand it retroactively. And who made you the legal expert? Jessica's voice pitched higher. Some cop dropout who plays with dogs all day. I felt the temperature in the yard drop about 10 degrees. Several of my neighbors stepped closer, not to Jessica, but to us. Dave put his phone away and crossed his arms. Mrs. Henderson was staring at Jessica with the kind of disapproval usually reserved for people who don't return their shopping carts. But it was the change in Thor that caught my attention. The big German Shepherd had gone completely still, his dark eyes fixed on Jessica with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Sarah noticed it too. I saw her glance down at him, then back at Jessica. I think you should leave, Sarah said quietly. Jessica laughed. I'll leave when I'm good and ready. This is still America, sweetheart. Free country. Not my backyard, I said. You need to go, Jess. Now. Or what? You'll call the cops on your children's mother? That'll look great in family court. That's when I realized Jessica hadn't just shown up to cause a scene. She was building a case. The realization hit me like ice water. Jessica wasn't here for money or to embarrass me, she was here to provoke exactly this kind of reaction. Every word she'd said, every escalation, it was all calculated. She wanted me to lose my temper in front of witnesses. She wanted Sarah to do something she could use against us. You're recording this, I said, noticing how she positioned herself to keep her purse at a specific angle. Your phone's been running this whole time. Jessica's smile widened. Documenting my children's father threatening me in front of strangers. Maybe. A girl has to protect herself. Sarah's hand found my arm, a subtle warning to stay calm. But I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. 8 years in K-9 had taught her to read people's intentions, and Jessica was broadcasting hers like a neon sign. What exactly do you want, Jessica? Sarah asked. Because this isn't about support modifications. This is about something else entirely. Smart girl. Jessica's voice dripped condescension. I want what's best for Emma and Tyler. And what's best for them is getting away from this unstable environment before someone gets hurt. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her gray hair practically bristling with indignation. Young lady, I've lived next to Marcus for 2 years. He's one of the most responsible fathers I've ever seen. Those children are lucky to have him. Are they? Jessica turned to face the growing crowd. Did you know his new wife keeps an attack dog? Did you know she was forced to quit the police department after an incident with excessive force? My blood ran cold. That wasn't true, Sarah had left by choice to start her own business, but Jessica was spinning a narrative that would sound believable to people who didn't know us. That's a lie, I said, but Jessica was already continuing. A German shepherd trained to attack on command, living in the same house as my babies every other weekend. Does that sound safe to any of you? Thor lifted his head higher, as if he knew he was being discussed. Several neighbors glanced at him uncertainly. He was a big dog, easily 90 pounds, and his alert posture could look intimidating if you were already primed to see him as dangerous. Thor has never shown aggression toward anyone, I said. He's been around Emma and Tyler dozens of times. That you know of, Jessica shot back. Children don't always tell their fathers when they're scared. Especially when they think it might make daddy angry. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I saw doubt creep into some of my neighbors' expressions. Dave was looking at Thor differently now. Even Mrs. Patterson took a small step back. That's enough, Sarah said, and something in her voice made everyone turn. You've made your point. Now you need to leave before this gets any uglier. Are you threatening me? Jessica's eyes lit up like she just won the lottery. Did everyone hear that? The woman with the attack dog just threatened me. I didn't threaten anyone, Sarah replied calmly. I suggested you leave voluntarily before you say something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not fighting harder for full custody 2 years ago. Jessica's mask was slipping now, her real anger bleeding through. But that's about to change. Emma and Tyler deserve better than a father who cares more about his new peace than his own children's safety. That's when Sarah's expression went completely blank. In 4 months of marriage, I'd never seen her look that cold. Thor seemed to sense the shift too, rising to his feet with fluid precision. Careful, Sarah said softly. You're walking into territory you don't understand. Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced now. Is that another threat? That's a warning. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Jessica had her phone angled to catch everything, Sarah looked like she was carved from stone, and Thor was watching Jessica with the kind of focused attention that made my mouth go dry. Then Jessica made her fatal mistake. You know what? I think I'll just wait for Emma and Tyler to get back from their grandmothers. They should see what kind of circus their father is running here. She pulled out a lawn chair that belonged to the Hendersons and sat down like she was claiming territory. What time did you say they'd be home, Marcus? 3 o'clock. 4. My heart stopped. The kids weren't coming back today, they were staying at my mom's until tomorrow afternoon. Jessica had no way of knowing that unless. You've been watching the house, Sarah said, voicing what I just realized. That's how you knew about the barbecue. That's how you knew exactly when to show up. Jessica's smug expression flickered. I have every right to know what's happening in my children's lives. You've been stalking us, I said, the pieces clicking together. The weird calls with no one on the line. The way you always seem to know things about our schedule. Jesus, Jess, for how long? I prefer concerned parenting, she replied, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. And I've learned some very interesting things. Like how your wife's previous job ended when she resigned under investigation after a suspect got hospitalized during an arrest. Sarah went completely still. Where did you hear that? I have my sources. Public records are surprisingly detailed when you know where to look. Jessica's smile returned, sharper than before. Excessive force complaint, internal affairs investigation, and a very convenient resignation before the hearing could conclude. Makes a person wonder what really happened. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. Sarah had told me about leaving the force, but she'd kept the details vague, said it was political bullshit and bureaucracy. I'd never pushed for specifics because everyone deserves privacy about their past. Tell them the whole story, Sarah said quietly. Oh, I think what I've shared paints a clear enough picture. Jessica stood up from the stolen chair, addressing the crowd again. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at a woman who was under investigation for police brutality before she quit in disgrace. And now she's training that animal to. The suspect was beating his girlfriend to death with a crowbar, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. When we arrived, she was unconscious and bleeding from her skull. He came at my partner with the same crowbar. The neighbors were hanging on every word now. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. My K-9 took him down exactly as trained, Sarah continued. Clean takedown, no excessive force. The suspect dislocated his shoulder when he fell, and his lawyer tried to claim brutality. Internal affairs cleared me completely, but the bureaucracy made continuing impossible. So I resigned and started my own business. Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. Sounds like you did your job exactly right, dear. Jessica's face was turning an alarming shade of red. That's not, the record shows. The record shows a cleared investigation and voluntary resignation, Sarah said. But you presented it as misconduct because it fit your narrative better. Narrative? Jessica's voice cracked. I'm trying to protect my children from a dangerous situation. By lying about easily verifiable facts. Dave stepped forward, his phone back out. Lady, I'm a paralegal. You want to talk about what looks bad in family court? That's when Jessica completely lost it. You people don't understand, she screamed, abandoning all pretense of control. That dog is a weapon. She's a failed cop with anger issues. And my ex-husband is so pussy-whipped he can't see that his precious new wife is going to get someone killed. Thor's ears flattened against his head, and I saw Sarah's hand move to her side in a gesture I'd seen her use during training sessions. Something was about to happen. The change in the yard's atmosphere was instant and electric. Jessica's screaming had crossed a line that even the most polite neighbors couldn't ignore, and I watched Mrs. Henderson's face transform from disapproving to genuinely angry. That's quite enough, the elderly woman said, stepping forward with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years managing unruly teenagers. You need to leave this property immediately. But Jessica was beyond reason now. Don't you dare tell me what to do. I'm trying to save those children from. That's when Thor moved. It wasn't aggressive, not yet, but the big German shepherd rose to his feet and took 3 deliberate steps forward, positioning himself directly between Jessica and the rest of the guests. His posture was alert but controlled, exactly like I'd seen during Sarah's training demonstrations. Jessica stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the lawn chair. See. That thing is ready to attack. Thor is responding to elevated stress levels and aggressive behavior, Sarah said calmly. He's trained to de-escalate situations by creating space between agitated individuals and potential targets. Bullshit. Jessica's voice pitched even higher. You just proved my point. That dog follows your commands like a loaded weapon. I noticed our neighbor Mike recording from his porch next door, and the Martinez family had come out of their house to see what the commotion was about. What had started as a private confrontation was becoming a neighborhood spectacle, which I was beginning to realize was exactly what Jessica wanted. You planned this whole thing, I said, the full scope of her manipulation finally becoming clear. You've been watching us for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity. You knew about the barbecue, you knew the kids wouldn't be here, and you came here specifically to create a scene. Jessica's laugh was brittle and too loud. Oh please, Marcus. Give me some credit for basic intelligence. You post every detail of your pathetic little life on social media. Excited to introduce Sarah to the neighborhood. Perfect day for a barbecue. You made it easy. Sarah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it briefly. Her expression shifted slightly, not worried, exactly, but more alert. Marcus, we need to wrap this up. Now. Why? Got somewhere more important to be. Jessica sneered. Let me guess, you have another dog training session where you teach innocent animals how to maul people. I have 3 clients whose security depends on their K-9 partners being properly trained, Sarah replied evenly. Dogs that protect judges, domestic violence victims, and federal witnesses. Real protection work, not whatever fantasy you've constructed in your head. The mention of federal witnesses seemed to hit Jessica differently. Her eyes narrowed, and I saw something calculating creep into her expression. Federal witnesses? What kind of people are you bringing around my children? The kind who are alive because of proper security protocols, Sarah said, but I heard a note of caution in her voice. All of which are confidential and none of which involve Emma or Tyler in any way. Confidential, Jessica repeated slowly. Like the confidential police work that got you investigated for brutality. Mrs. Patterson stepped closer to us, her voice dropping to a worried whisper. Dear, I think you should call the police. This woman seems unstable. Jessica whipped around to face her. Unstable? I'm trying to protect my children from a woman who trains attack dogs and associates with dangerous criminals. Federal witnesses aren't criminals, Dave called out from where he stood. They're usually people testifying against criminals. Pretty big difference. Details, Jessica waved dismissively. The point is, she brings violence into her work, and now she's bringing that violence into my children's lives. Thor's posture shifted again, and I saw Sarah's hand make a subtle gesture, not a command, exactly, but some kind of communication. The dog's ears perked forward, and his attention focused more intently on Jessica. Here's what's going to happen, Jessica announced, pulling her phone out and holding it up like a shield. I'm calling Child Protective Services right now. They need to know that Emma and Tyler are being exposed to trained attack animals and a woman with a history of violence. My blood turned to ice. CPS involvement could drag out for months, create a nightmare of investigations and supervised visits, and give Jessica exactly the ammunition she needed for a custody modification. You're making a mistake, Sarah said quietly. A big one. Am I? Because from where I stand, I'm documenting a clear threat to my children's safety. Jessica's finger hovered over her phone screen. Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss a more reasonable custody arrangement. Say, supervised visits only. Maybe weekends at my house instead of here. There it was. The real endgame. You're trying to blackmail us, I said, my voice barely controlled. This whole performance, the accusations, the threats, it's all leverage for a custody grab. I'm negotiating for my children's well-being, Jessica corrected. But if you want to involve the authorities, I'm happy to let them sort it out. Sarah's phone buzzed again, and this time when she looked at it, her entire demeanor changed. Whatever the message said, it had shifted something fundamental in her approach to this situation. Jessica, Sarah said, her voice carrying a new edge I'd never heard before. I think you should know that making false reports to CPS is a felony in this state. So is filing false police reports, harassment, and stalking. Those aren't false. And, Sarah continued, her hand dropping to rest casually near Thor's head, making threats against federal witnesses or their security personnel is a federal crime that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Jessica's face went pale. I never threatened any federal witnesses. You threatened me, Sarah said simply. And as of this morning, I'm providing security services for a witness in an ongoing federal investigation. Which makes your threats against me, and your attempts to interfere with my work, a matter of national security. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and what looked like genuine fear in the span of about 3 seconds. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice had lost all its earlier bravado. That's not real. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Jessica the screen. I couldn't see what was on it from my angle, but whatever it was made Jessica take 2 quick steps backward. Deputy Marshal Chen called 20 minutes ago, Sarah said calmly. The witness I've been training protection protocols for received a credible threat this morning. As of 11:47 a.m., I'm officially contracted as auxiliary security personnel for the U.S. Marshal Service. That text was confirmation of my temporary federal designation. My brain was struggling to process what I was hearing. Sarah had mentioned the marshal training, but she described it as routine corporate security work. I had no idea it was connected to witness protection. That's impossible, Jessica stammered. You can't just become a federal agent in 20 minutes. I'm not an agent, Sarah corrected. I'm a contractor with specialized K-9 training that the Marshal Service needed on short notice. But the legal protections are the same. Threatening me or attempting to interfere with my work is now a federal offense. Dave whistled low from across the yard. Lady, you might want to stop talking and start walking. But Jessica was Jessica, which meant she doubled down instead of cutting her losses. This is convenient timing, isn't it? Right when you need leverage against me, suddenly you're some kind of federal contractor. Sarah held up her phone again. Would you like me to call Deputy Marshal Chen so you can verify my credentials? I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about the surveillance you've been conducting on a federal contractor's residence. Surveillance? Jessica's voice cracked. I never said anything about surveillance. You knew about our barbecue timing, our schedule, details about our house that aren't on social media, I said, the pieces clicking together. You've been watching us for weeks. Mrs. Henderson gasped. You mean she's been lurking around the neighborhood? Taking pictures? I have every right to know what's happening in my children's lives, Jessica said, but she was backing toward the gate now. Any judge would agree that. Any judge would be very interested in your methods, Sarah interrupted. Especially when those methods include stalking federal personnel and making false accusations designed to interfere with national security operations. Jessica's face was now completely white except for 2 bright red spots on her cheeks. You're twisting everything. I came here to discuss child support, and you're making it sound like harassment, stalking, and federal interference charges. Dave called out. Because that's what it sounds like to me, and I actually know what those charges look like. Thor had moved closer to Sarah during the exchange, and I noticed his posture had shifted to something more alert. Not aggressive, exactly, but focused in a way that made the hair on my neck stand up. This isn't over, Jessica said, fumbling with the gate latch. Emma and Tyler deserve to know what kind of people their father associates with. The kind who protect federal witnesses from criminals, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Sounds like good people to me. Jessica finally got the gate open, but she turned back one more time. You think you're so smart with your federal contractor bullshit. But I know what I saw. That dog responds to your commands like a weapon, and sooner or later, someone's going to get hurt. That's when Sarah's expression went completely cold. Sits, she said quietly. Thor immediately sat, his attention focused entirely on Sarah. Platz. The big German shepherd lay down smoothly, never taking his eyes off Sarah's face. Bleep. Thor held position, statue still. This is what obedience training looks like, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. What you're describing would be something else entirely. Jessica's mouth opened and closed several times without sound coming out. The demonstration had been so calm, so controlled, that it somehow made her earlier accusations sound completely hysterical. Get off my property, I said finally. Don't come back. Jessica's parting shot was delivered from the safety of the sidewalk. The kids will hear about this. They'll know what their precious stepmother really is. Then she was gone, practically running toward her car. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of a tornado. The silence stretched for what felt like hours before Mrs. Henderson started clapping. Slowly, one by one, the other neighbors joined in until my entire backyard was applauding Sarah like she'd just given a performance of a lifetime. Well, Dave said, grinning widely, that was better than anything on Netflix. I should have felt relieved. Jessica was gone, my neighbors had seen her true colors, and Sarah had handled the situation with more grace and strategic thinking than I could have imagined. But my stomach was churning with a sick certainty that this was far from over. Sarah, I said quietly, pulling her aside while the neighbors gradually returned to their interrupted conversations, how much of that federal contractor thing was real? She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then pulled out her phone and showed me the text thread with Deputy Marshal Chen. The timestamps were real, 11:47 a.m., just like she'd said. The message was brief but official, contract approved. You're active as of now. Situation escalated this morning. Need to move fast. It's all real, she said, tucking the phone away. I've been working with them for 3 weeks on training protocols for a high-value witness. German businessmen testifying against a trafficking network. This morning they got word that the organization might have found his location. My brain struggled to process this. So when Jessica was screaming at you about being a failed cop, you were actually on my way to becoming temporary federal security personnel, she finished. The timing was either incredibly lucky or incredibly unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Thor had moved to Sarah's side and was leaning against her leg, his earlier alertness settling back into calm attention. I noticed several neighbors glancing at him differently now, not with suspicion, but with something closer to respect. The thing is, Sarah continued, lowering her voice even more, Jessica's accusations aren't going to stop here. She's going to research everything she can about my federal work, and that could actually create problems for the witness protection case. Ice water hit my veins. What kind of problems? If she starts digging into Marshal Service contractors, asking questions, making FOIA requests, it creates a paper trail that could potentially compromise the witness's location. Sarah ran her hand through Thor's fur, a gesture I'd learned meant she was thinking through tactical scenarios. And if she's been surveilling our house for weeks like I suspect, she might have information about my training schedule, the people who've been coming and going. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. Are you saying Jessica might accidentally stumble into a federal investigation? Or purposefully interfere with one? Sarah's expression was grim. She's not stupid, Marcus. Erratic and manipulative, yes, but not stupid. She'll figure out that her best leverage against me isn't custody court anymore, it's creating enough chaos around my federal work that I become a liability. Mrs. Henderson approached us, carrying a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies that somehow always appeared during neighborhood crises. You two handled that beautifully, she said, offering the plate. But I have to ask, should we be worried about that woman coming back? Sarah and I exchanged glances. Honestly? Yes, Sarah said. She's not done with this. Well then, Mrs. Henderson replied matter-of-factly, we'll just have to keep an eye out for each other, won't we? I've got a clear view of your driveway from my kitchen window, and Harold's been looking for an excuse to test out that new security camera system he insisted on installing. Dave wandered over, still holding his phone. Hey, I hope you don't mind, but I recorded most of that interaction. Figured you might need it for legal purposes. He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. Also, my ex-wife pulled similar shit during our divorce. Document everything. As my neighbors gradually left, each offering support and promising to watch out for Jessica's return, I found myself standing in my backyard with Sarah and Thor, surrounded by the debris of what was supposed to be a simple neighborhood barbecue. Abandoned plates of food, overturned chairs, and the lingering tension of Jessica's accusations hung in the air like smoke. We need to call your lawyer, Sarah said, already pulling up contacts on her phone. And I need to brief Deputy Marshal Chen about the potential security breach. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom, kids asking when they can come home tomorrow. Emma specifically wants to know if Sarah will teach her more about training Thor. Everything okay? I stared at the message, reality hitting me like a freight train. Emma and Tyler would be back tomorrow afternoon, walking into the aftermath of Jessica's meltdown with no idea that their mother had just declared war on our entire family. The next morning brought 3 phone calls that turned my coffee cold and my stomach into knots. The first came at 7:23 a.m. from my lawyer, Janet Morrison. Marcus, I need you to come in today. Your ex-wife filed an emergency motion yesterday evening claiming you and Sarah pose an imminent threat to the children. She's requesting immediate suspension of your custody pending a full investigation. I nearly dropped the phone. Based on what evidence? According to the filing, she has video documentation of your wife using a trained attack dog to threaten her, testimony from neighbors about your unstable living environment, and claims that Sarah is involved in criminal activity under federal investigation. Janet's voice was grim. The hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. That gives us exactly 4 days to prepare a defense. The second call came 15 minutes later from Child Protective Services. A caseworker named Linda Chen, no relation, despite the shared last name, would be conducting a home visit Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. to assess the safety of the environment for Emma and Tyler. This is routine following certain types of complaints, she assured me in a voice that sounded anything but routine. We'll need to speak with you, your wife, and observe the dog's behavior around simulated child interactions. The third call was Sarah talking to Deputy Marshal Chen, and I only caught her side of the conversation, but it was enough to make my blood pressure spike. Yes, sir, the subject has been conducting surveillance of my residence for approximately 3 weeks. No, sir, she doesn't appear to have direct knowledge of the witness, but she's made threats to interfere with my contracted work. Understood. I'll maintain operational security protocols until further notice. She hung up and immediately started pacing, tracking her movement with concerned attention. How bad is it? I asked. Bad. The witness received another threat last night. Someone called his hotel and asked for the German businessman in federal protection. The marshals think there might be a leak somewhere in the information chain. She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Jessica's timing couldn't be worse. Any disruption to my security clearance right now leaves them scrambling to find replacement K-9 support. And if they can't find replacement support, the witness gets moved to a less secure location, which increases his risk exponentially. Sarah's jaw was tight. 3 months of preparation worked down the drain because your ex-wife decided to wage psychological warfare. My phone rang again. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, Emma and Tyler grinning at the camera during last weekend's visit. Marcus, honey, there's a problem. Mom's voice was strained in a way I hadn't heard since Dad's heart attack 2 years ago. Jessica showed up here an hour ago demanding to take the kids home immediately. She's outside in her car right now, refusing to leave until I bring them out. My heart stopped. Don't let her take them. The custody order specifies they stay with you until 3 p.m. today, then come to me. I know that, but she's claiming there's been some kind of emergency. Something about you and Sarah being investigated by federal agents. Mom's confusion was obvious. She keeps saying the children aren't safe with you anymore. Mom, listen carefully. Do not let Jessica take Emma and Tyler. Call the police if she won't leave your property. I'm driving over right now. Sarah was already grabbing her keys before I finished the call. Thor, come. We're going to get the kids. But as we headed toward the garage, Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from Deputy Marshal Chen. She read it, stopped walking, and went completely pale. What is it? I asked. The witness situation just escalated. Someone tried to break into his hotel room 20 minutes ago. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, part anger, part fear, part grim determination. Marcus, I think Jessica's interference might have created a much bigger problem than we realized. The drive to my mother's house took exactly 18 minutes, but it felt like hours. Sarah spent the entire trip on her phone with Deputy Marshal Chen, speaking in clipped, professional phrases that made my skin crawl. No sir, I haven't disclosed any operational details to civilian parties. Yes sir, I understand the timeline. Relocating the asset within 6 hours, understood. When we pulled into Mom's driveway, Jessica's silver Honda was parked sideways across the street like she'd abandoned it in a hurry. Through Mom's front window, I could see Emma's face pressed against the glass, her 9-year-old features tight with confusion and worry. Stay in the car for a minute, Sarah said, ending her call. Let me assess the situation first. But before either of us could move, Jessica appeared from behind Mom's hedges, walking directly toward our car with her phone held high, obviously recording. There they are, she announced to her phone's camera. The federal fugitive and her attack dog, coming to collect my children from their safe haven. Sarah's expression went flat and professional in a way that reminded me she'd spent years dealing with dangerous suspects. Marcus, get out slowly, hands visible, don't give her anything she can misinterpret. As I opened my car door, I heard Tyler's voice from inside Mom's house. Why is Mommy yelling? Did we do something wrong? The question hit me like a physical blow. My 7-year-old son was asking if he was responsible for his mother's meltdown because that's how Jessica operated. Everything was always someone else's fault, usually the most vulnerable person in the room. Jessica, you need to leave, I called out, walking toward Mom's front porch. The kids are with their grandmother as scheduled. You have no legal right to disrupt that. Legal right? Jessica laughed, still filming. I have every right to protect my children from a woman who's under federal investigation for criminal activity. Sarah got out of the car, leaving Thor inside, and I saw her hands positioned in a way that looked casual but probably wasn't. Ma'am, you're repeating false information that could constitute defamation. I'm not under investigation, I'm contracted by federal law enforcement. Semantics. Jessica's voice pitched higher. The point is, you're involved in dangerous criminal cases, and now someone tried to break into a hotel room. What if those criminals come looking for you at Marcus's house while my babies are there? My blood ran cold. She'd been listening to Sarah's phone conversation somehow, or she had information she shouldn't have. How do you know about any hotel incident? Jessica's smile was sharp and triumphant. I have my sources. Did you think I'd just roll over and let you two endanger Emma and Tyler? I've been doing research, Marcus. Real research. Mom opened her front door, and I could see Emma and Tyler hovering behind her, their young faces reflecting confusion and fear that no child should have to experience. Jessica Marie Thompson, Mom said in her sternest grandmother voice, you get off my property this instant. You're scaring these children with your nonsense. Nonsense? Jessica whirled toward Mom, her phone still recording. Your son is married to a woman who trains attack dogs for federal witnesses, and someone just tried to murder one of those witnesses. You call that nonsense? Emma started crying. Not the dramatic tears of a scraped knee or denied privilege, but the quiet, scared crying of a child who senses adult danger but doesn't understand it. That's when I lost my temper completely. Get the hell away from my family, I said, stepping between Jessica and Mom's porch. You're terrorizing your own children to score points in some twisted game. Your family. Jessica's face contorted with rage. Those are my children, Marcus, and I will burn down everything you've built to keep them safe. Sarah moved closer, her voice cutting through Jessica's hysteria. Mrs. Thompson, you're creating a public disturbance while making false statements about ongoing federal operations. That's a crime. Prove it, Jessica snarled back. Call your federal buddies. Let's see how fast they throw you under the bus when they realize you're a security risk. Then she did something that changed everything. She turned her phone toward Mom's house and started filming Emma and Tyler through the window. Say goodbye to Daddy, kids. You might not see him for a very long time. That was the moment Sarah decided Jessica had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I saw it happen in real time. Something shifted in Sarah's posture, her breathing, the way she held her head. 8 years of police work had taught her to de-escalate situations, but 8 years of police work had also taught her when de-escalation was no longer an option. Bleep, she said quietly toward our car. Through the window, I saw Thor's ears perk up, but he remained seated exactly where Sarah had left him. Jessica was still filming Emma and Tyler, narrating for her phone like she was hosting some twisted documentary. As you can see, my children are being held against their will while their father associates with federal criminals. Ma'am, step away from the window. Sarah's voice had dropped into what I was learning to recognize as her command tone. Not loud, not aggressive, but carrying absolute authority. Jessica ignored her, moving closer to Mom's porch. Emma, Tyler, Mommy's here to take you somewhere safe. No. The word came from Emma herself, spoken through the screen door with 9-year-old determination. We want to go to Dad's house. Grandma said we could help make pancakes for breakfast tomorrow. Jessica's face crumpled for a split second before hardening back into rage. Sweetie, Daddy's house isn't safe anymore. The bad people who hurt other people might come looking for Sarah. Tyler's voice was smaller, more scared. What bad people? Sarah teaches Thor tricks. Thor's not bad. The bad people that Sarah works with, Jessica continued, her phone still rolling. Federal criminals and people who. That's when Mom had apparently heard enough. The front door opened completely, and my 72-year-old mother stepped onto her porch with the kind of fury I hadn't seen since I'd crashed her car at 17. Jessica Thompson, you stop this right now. Mom's voice carried the authority of 4 decades teaching middle school. These children don't understand what you're talking about, and you're scaring them for no good reason. No good reason. Jessica spun toward Mom, finally lowering her phone. Did Marcus tell you that Sarah's federal witness was almost murdered last night? Did he mention that dangerous criminals might now be looking for anyone connected to her work? I felt my stomach drop. The way she said it, with specific details about timing and circumstances, suggested she knew far more about Sarah's federal contract than she should have. How do you know those details? Sarah asked, and I heard something dangerous creeping into her voice. Jessica's smile was triumphant. Public records, police scanners, and a private investigator who specializes in federal cases. Did you think your little witness protection work was completely secret? My blood turned to ice. You hired a PI to investigate Sarah? I hired a professional to research the woman living with my children, Jessica corrected. And what I found was very illuminating. Sarah Chen, former police officer, resigned under investigation, now contracted with the U.S. Marshal Service for a witness named Klaus Brennan, German national, testifying against the Kozlov trafficking network. Sarah went completely still. You need to stop talking. Right now. Why? Because I've exposed your precious federal operation. Jessica was practically glowing with vindication. Klaus Brennan, Hotel Morrison downtown, room 847 until this morning when someone tried to break down his door. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Emma and Tyler had stopped crying, sensing that something much bigger than a custody dispute was happening on Grandma's front lawn. Ma'am, Sarah said, her voice now carrying a different kind of authority entirely, you have just disclosed classified information related to an active federal investigation on a recording device. That's a felony. Jessica's face flickered with uncertainty for the first time. It's not classified if I found it through legal research. The witness's name, location, and room number are absolutely classified, Sarah replied. And if your private investigator obtained that information through legal channels, then there's a massive security breach that needs immediate federal attention. She was already dialing her phone, stepping away from us to speak in urgent, clipped sentences to what I assumed was Deputy Marshal Chen. Jessica watched her go, and I saw doubt creeping into her expression as the implications of what she just said began to register. I was just trying to protect Emma and Tyler, she said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. By potentially exposing a federal witness to assassination. Mom's voice was withering. By hiring investigators to spy on classified operations. Jessica, what have you done? That's when Tyler's small voice cut through everything. Daddy, is Sarah in trouble? Are we in trouble? Looking at my 7-year-old son's frightened face, I realized that Jessica's war against our family had just escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The next 10 minutes unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Sarah's conversation with Deputy Marshal Chen grew increasingly urgent, her voice dropping to whispers that somehow sounded more ominous than shouting. Jessica stood frozen in Mom's driveway, her phone still clutched in her hand, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd just done. Daddy? Emma's voice drifted through the screen door, small and confused. Why is everyone being scary? Before I could answer, 3 black SUVs turned onto Mom's quiet residential street in perfect formation. No sirens, no lights, just the kind of coordinated arrival that made my skin crawl with dread. Oh shit, Jessica breathed, her face going white as paper. This is really happening. Sarah ended her call and walked back toward us, her expression grim. Klaus Brennan was moved to a secure facility 20 minutes ago. The marshals are treating this as a potential breach of witness security. She looked directly at Jessica. They're going to want to speak with you about your private investigator and how you obtained classified information. I didn't know it was classified. Jessica's voice cracked. My PI said everything came from public databases and police scanners. Then your PI either lied to you or committed federal crimes, Sarah replied flatly. Either way, you just broadcast a federal witness's personal details on a recording that you'll probably post to social media within the hour. The lead SUV pulled into Mom's driveway, and I watched Jessica's bravado completely collapse as 2 men in dark suits got out. They moved with the kind of casual authority that made it clear this wasn't their first witness security crisis. Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marshal Williams, the taller man said, approaching Jessica with professional courtesy that somehow managed to sound like a threat. We need to discuss the information you just disclosed about Klaus Brennan. Jessica looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route from Mom's front yard. I was just trying to protect my children. I didn't mean to interfere with anything federal. Unfortunately, intent doesn't matter when classified information gets compromised, Marshal Williams replied. We're going to need your phone, any recordings you've made, and complete information about the private investigator you hired. You can't just take my phone, Jessica protested weakly. I have rights. You have the right to cooperate voluntarily or have a federal warrant issued within the hour, Williams said matter-of-factly. Given that a witness under our protection received credible death threats, and you somehow obtained his exact location and personal details, this is being treated as a potential security breach with national security implications. Through Mom's window, I could see Tyler pressed against the glass, his 7-year-old eyes wide with terror at the sight of federal agents in Grandma's driveway. Emma was crying again, the kind of deep, frightened sobs that meant she understood something terrible was happening but couldn't process what. Marcus, Mom called from her porch, I'm taking the children inside to the back room. They don't need to see this. As Mom ushered Emma and Tyler away from the windows, Jessica seemed to realize for the first time that her quest to protect her children had resulted in them being traumatized by federal agents investigating their own mother for potential witness tampering. This is insane, she whispered, staring at the SUVs like they might disappear if she blinked hard enough. I hired a private investigator to research my ex-husband's wife. That's not illegal. Hiring someone to investigate federal contractors working witness protection cases definitely falls into a legal gray area, Marshal Williams replied. And broadcasting classified witness information crosses several very bright legal lines. Sarah approached the group, Thor now at her side on a leash. Deputy Marshal, do you need me to brief you on the timeline of Mrs. Thompson's surveillance activities? She's been watching our residence for approximately 3 weeks. Jessica's face went from white to green. Surveillance? I drove by your house a few times. That's not surveillance. You knew our exact schedule, the timing of private events, and details about visitors to our home, Sarah continued methodically. That level of intelligence gathering on federal contractor residences raises additional security concerns. The second marshal, who'd been taking notes throughout the conversation, looked up from his notepad. Mrs. Thompson, we're going to need you to come with us for a formal interview. This situation requires immediate clarification before we can assess the security implications. As they led Jessica toward their SUV, she turned back one last time, her earlier rage replaced by something that looked almost like panic. Marcus, tell Emma and Tyler I was just trying to keep them safe. Tell them Mommy didn't mean for any of this to happen. Watching my ex-wife get into a federal vehicle while my children hid in their grandmother's back room, I realized that Jessica's war against our family had just transformed into something none of us could have predicted or prepared for. The federal SUVs pulled away from Mom's house at 11:47 a.m., taking Jessica and what remained of our normal life with them. Sarah immediately got back on her phone with Deputy Marshal Chen while I tried to figure out how to explain to Emma and Tyler why their mother had just been driven away by men in suits. "Daddy, are we going to jail?" Tyler asked when I found him and Emma huddled in Mom's guest room, both of them clutching the stuffed animals they'd brought for their sleepover. "No, buddy. Nobody's going to jail," I said, pulling him into a hug and hoping it was true. "Mommy just needs to talk to some important people about grown-up stuff." Emma, who at 9 was old enough to sense when adults were lying, looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. She was yelling about bad people coming to hurt us. "Is that real?" Before I could answer, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully controlled but her stress obvious to anyone who knew her well. "Kids, I need to borrow your dad for a few minutes. Can you help Grandma make hot chocolate?" Once we were alone in Mom's kitchen, Sarah's professional mask slipped completely. "Marcus, this is so much worse than I thought. The private investigator Jessica hired isn't just some divorce specialist, he's a former federal agent who was terminated for selling classified information 3 years ago." My stomach dropped. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning Gregory Vasquez, age 47, formerly with DEA, currently running an investigation service that specializes in obtaining information that should be impossible to get legally." Sarah showed me her phone screen. "Deputy Marshal Chen just sent me his file. Vasquez has connections to the same Eastern European networks that Klaus Brennan is testifying against." The kitchen spun around me. "Are you saying Jessica accidentally hired someone connected to the people trying to kill the witness?" "I'm saying Jessica hired someone who may have deliberately steered her toward Klaus's location." Sarah's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "The timeline is too convenient. She starts surveilling us exactly 3 weeks ago, which is exactly when Klaus arrived in protective custody. Her PI discovers Klaus's hotel and room number within hours of the assassination attempt. My phone rang, Janet Morrison, my lawyer, probably calling about the emergency custody hearing. I let it go to voicemail. There's more," Sarah continued. "The marshals found evidence that someone's been monitoring police scanner frequencies and cross-referencing them with federal contractor databases. Vasquez had detailed files on my work history, my training schedule, even Thor's veterinary records." "Thor's vet records? Why would anyone need those?" "Because attack dogs have specific medical requirements. If someone wanted to neutralize K-9 security, they'd need to know about allergies, medications, behavioral triggers." Sarah ran her hands through her hair. "Marcus, I think Jessica's custody war accidentally provided cover for a much more sophisticated operation. The implications hit me like a freight train. So when Jessica showed up yesterday screaming about you training attack dogs, she was broadcasting tactical intelligence about federal security measures to whoever might be listening." Sarah's phone buzzed with another urgent text. "And now Klaus Brennan is in lockdown, 3 months of preparation work is compromised, and the trafficking network knows exactly how close we came to their witness." Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face grave. "Marcus, honey, there's a news van pulling up outside. And your phone's been buzzing non-stop." I checked my missed calls, Janet Morrison, 3 calls, Emma's school, 2 calls, Tyler's daycare, my boss, my brother in California, and 6 numbers I didn't recognize. "The story's going public," Sarah said grimly. "Local woman detained by federal marshals for witness tampering makes for good headlines." Through Mom's front window, I could see a reporter setting up a camera on the sidewalk while a small crowd of neighbors gathered at a respectful distance. Mrs. Henderson was among them, along with Dave from yesterday's barbecue and several other people I recognized from the neighborhood. "Sarah," I said quietly, "what happens if they can't relocate Klaus safely? What happens to your federal contract?" Her expression went completely blank. "If Klaus gets killed because of this security breach, I'll never work in federal law enforcement again. And depending on how deep this conspiracy goes, we might all end up needing witness protection ourselves." As if summoned by my worst fears, Emma's small voice called from the guest room, "Daddy, there's a man with a camera trying to look in Grandma's window." The circus was just beginning. The reporter outside Mom's window turned out to be just the beginning. By 2 p.m., there were 3 news vans, a cluster of neighbors who'd morphed from curious to concerned, and what looked like 2 unmarked federal vehicles positioned at strategic points around Mom's block. Sarah spent most of the afternoon coordinating with Deputy Marshal Chen while I tried to keep Emma and Tyler calm and entertained in an increasingly surreal situation. We built blanket forts in Mom's living room and played board games, but every few minutes one of them would ask when Mommy was coming back or why the people outside had cameras. At 3:17 p.m., my lawyer Janet Morrison finally reached me. "Marcus, we have a serious problem," she said without preamble. "Jessica's emergency custody motion has been expedited due to the federal investigation. The hearing's been moved to tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., and the judge specifically wants to address the security concerns surrounding the children's welfare." My heart sank. "What kind of security concerns?" "According to the motion Jessica filed before her federal interview, Emma and Tyler are at risk due to Sarah's involvement with dangerous criminal elements and the presence of a weaponized animal in your home." Janet's voice was tight with frustration. The fact that federal marshals detained her actually strengthens her argument that there are legitimate safety issues. "But she's the one who created the security breach," I protested. "Doesn't matter. Her lawyer, and yes, she somehow managed to get legal representation while in federal custody, is arguing that she was acting as a concerned mother who uncovered genuine threats to her children's safety." Janet paused, and I heard papers shuffling. "Marcus, they're requesting immediate emergency custody pending a full federal security clearance investigation." Through Mom's kitchen window, I watched Emma and Tyler playing with Thor in the backyard, their laughter a bright spot in an increasingly dark day. Thor was being his usual gentle giant self, letting Tyler use him as a pillow while Emma practiced the basic commands Sarah had taught her. "There's something else," Janet continued. CPS called. "Due to the federal investigation, tomorrow's home visit has been upgraded to a full family assessment. They're sending a team of 3 caseworkers, and they want to interview the children separately about their exposure to federal law enforcement situations." My blood ran cold. They want to interrogate Emma and Tyler about this mess. They want to ensure the children haven't been traumatized by exposure to federal investigations, witness protection protocols, and what they're calling high-risk security environments. Janet's voice softened slightly. "Marcus, I've seen cases like this before. Once federal agencies get involved, family courts tend to err on the side of extreme caution. Sarah appeared at my elbow, having finished her latest call with the marshals. Her expression told me the news from her end wasn't any better. Gregory Vasquez disappeared, she said quietly. The FBI raided his office this morning and found evidence of ongoing communications with known associates of the Kozlov network. He's been feeding them information about federal contractor activities for at least 6 months. The room spun around me. So Jessica really did accidentally hire someone working for the bad guys? Accidentally, yes. But the damage is the same. Sarah glanced toward the backyard where our kids were playing. Klaus Brennan is being moved to a secure facility in another state. The trafficking case is probably compromised beyond repair. And the Kozlov network now knows that I was the K-9 trainer assigned to Klaus's protection detail. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, saw the news. Sorry this happened to you. Dave, your neighbor. Then another, standing by if you need anything. Mrs. Henderson. And another, local news is making Sarah sound like a hero. Don't let them twist this. Mike from next door. The neighborhood support is nice, I said, showing Sarah the messages, but I don't think it's going to matter much in family court tomorrow morning. There's something else, Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Deputy Marshal Chen asked me to consider voluntary relocation for our family's safety. If the Kozlov network views us as ongoing threats. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Through the window, I watched Emma teaching Tyler how to give Thor proper hand signals, both of them giggling when the big dog tilted his head in confusion at Tyler's enthusiastic but incorrect gestures. In less than 24 hours, we'd gone from a neighborhood barbecue to a federal investigation that might cost us our children, our home, and our safety. And Jessica was still in federal custody, probably just now beginning to understand what her war against our family had actually unleashed. The call from Jessica's lawyer came at 6:43 p.m., just as we were trying to convince Emma and Tyler that sleeping at Grandma's house was an adventure rather than a necessity. Mr. Chen, this is Patricia Valdez representing Jessica Thompson. My client was released from federal custody an hour ago, and we need to discuss the children's immediate welfare. I put the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. What's there to discuss? Emma and Tyler are exactly where the custody agreement says they should be. The circumstances have changed significantly, Valdez replied in that smooth lawyer voice that made my teeth itch. Mrs. Thompson has provided federal investigators with crucial information about a security breach that directly impacts your household. Given that revelation, we believe the children require immediate protection. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of information? Information that suggests the Kozlov trafficking network may have identified your residence as a target due to your federal contract work. My client's investigation, while perhaps overzealous, has uncovered genuine threats to these children's safety. My stomach dropped. Are you saying they know where we live? According to Mrs. Thompson's private investigator, who is now cooperating fully with federal authorities, the Kozlov network has been mapping addresses of all personnel connected to the Klaus Brennan protection detail. Valdez's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. Your home address, your children's schools, even their grandmother's residence have been under surveillance for the past 2 weeks. I looked at Sarah, whose face had gone completely white. Through the kitchen window, I could see one of the unmarked federal vehicles parked across from Mom's house, and suddenly its presence felt less protective and more ominous. That's impossible, Sarah said. Operational security protocols specifically prevent MS. Chen, your protocols were compromised the moment Gregory Vasquez began selling information to hostile foreign nationals, Valdez interrupted. My client may have been the unwitting catalyst, but she also discovered a security breach that federal agencies missed for 6 months. Emma's voice drifted from the living room. Daddy, why are you talking so quiet? Are we still in trouble? I covered the phone's microphone and called back, just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Keep playing with Tyler. Here's what's going to happen, Valdez continued. Tomorrow's custody hearing will demonstrate that Emma and Tyler are at genuine risk due to circumstances beyond their father's control. Mrs. Thompson is prepared to provide temporary safe housing at an undisclosed location until federal authorities can guarantee the children's security. Undisclosed location. My voice cracked. You're talking about Jessica taking my kids into hiding? I'm talking about a mother protecting her children from international criminals who have targeted their family due to their stepmother's federal work, Valdez corrected smoothly. The judge will have to weigh ongoing federal security concerns against normal custody arrangements. Sarah grabbed the phone. Ms. Valdez, if the Kozlov network has been conducting surveillance, your client and her children are just as much at risk as anyone else. Moving them to an undisclosed location without federal protection actually increases their danger. Which is why Mrs. Thompson has been offered placement in a private security program run by former federal agents, Valdez replied. People with extensive experience in protecting families from exactly this type of threat. My blood turned to ice. What private security program? Run by who? Details will be presented at tomorrow's hearing. But I can tell you that Mrs. Thompson's cooperation with federal investigators has opened doors to protection resources that wouldn't normally be available to civilian families. After Valdez hung up, Sarah and I stared at each other across Mom's kitchen table while the sound of our children's laughter echoed from the next room. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, I think Jessica just figured out how to use our worst nightmare as her biggest advantage. Outside, another unmarked vehicle pulled up to Mom's curb, its occupant scanning the street with the kind of professional attention that made me realize we might already be too late to protect the normal life we've been fighting so hard to preserve. The custody hearing at 8 a.m. sharp felt like walking into a courtroom designed for our destruction. Judge Margaret Chen, no relation, despite sharing my last name, reviewed Jessica's emergency motion while Emma and Tyler sat in the hallway with my mother, completely unaware that the next hour would determine whether they'd be going home with me or disappearing into Jessica's private security program. Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table looking perfectly composed, her lawyer Patricia Valdez having somehow transformed yesterday's federal detention into evidence of maternal heroism. Sarah and I sat with Janet Morrison, surrounded by folders full of documentation that suddenly felt inadequate against the specter of international trafficking networks. Your Honor, Valdez began, my client's investigation, while unconventional, has uncovered a genuine threat to these children's safety. The federal government has confirmed that the Kozlov network has been conducting surveillance of Mr. Chen's residence for weeks. Judge Chen looked up from the file. Ms. Valdez, your client was detained yesterday for potentially compromising federal witness security. How does that support her fitness as a parent? Because her actions, however misguided, revealed security failures that put Emma and Tyler at direct risk, Valdez replied smoothly. Mrs. Thompson is prepared to relocate the children to a secure facility until federal authorities can guarantee their safety. That's when Sarah stood up, something she'd never done in the previous hearings I'd witnessed. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Chen frowned. Ms. Chen, you're not a party to this custody matter. No, Your Honor, but I am the federal contractor whose work has created this security situation. Sarah's voice carried the same calm authority I'd heard her use with Thor. And I have information about Mrs. Thompson's private security program that the court needs to hear. Janet Morrison looked panicked, but Judge Chen gestured for Sarah to continue. Your Honor, at 6:30 this morning, I received confirmation from Deputy Marshal Chen that Gregory Vasquez, the private investigator hired by Mrs. Thompson, has been arrested for treason. He wasn't just selling information to the Kozlov network, he was actively recruiting civilian assets to help locate federal witnesses. Jessica's face went pale. Valdez started to object, but Sarah continued. The private security program offered to Mrs. Thompson is run by former associates of Mr. Vasquez. The federal government believes it's a front designed to give the Kozlov network direct access to the children of federal contractors. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed the screen to Judge Chen. This text from Deputy Marshal Chen arrived 20 minutes ago. Kozlov network planning to use Thompson custody case as leverage against federal witnesses. Do not allow children to leave court with unsecured parties. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Furthermore, Sarah continued, Klaus Brennan was safely relocated yesterday evening. The security breach has been contained, and the trafficking case is proceeding as scheduled. There is no ongoing threat to our household. Judge Chen looked at Jessica, whose perfect composure was cracking. Mrs. Thompson, were you aware that your security consultants might have connections to the criminal network in question? No, Your Honor. I was told they were former federal agents who specialized in family protection. By Gregory Vasquez, Sarah added. Who is now facing federal charges for conspiring with the same people he was supposed to be protecting families from. 20 minutes later, Judge Chen denied Jessica's emergency motion entirely. Emma and Tyler would remain on their regular custody schedule, the CPS investigation was suspended pending the resolution of federal security concerns, and Jessica was ordered to have no contact with any private security personnel until the FBI completed their investigation of Vasquez's network. As we walked out of the courthouse with our children, Jessica stopped us on the steps. I really was trying to protect them, she said quietly, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen her. I know, I replied. But maybe next time, try talking to us before you accidentally hire enemy spies. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Daddy, can we go home now? Thor probably misses us. Looking at my daughter's hopeful face, I realized that somehow, against all odds, we were finally going home.